Salutations and welcome back to another video. I know most of you wouldn't have thought you would see me so soon, but Twitter is the platform that keeps on giving, with LSMark constantly finding himself in conflict with animation Twitter. This happened a while back ago with his Sonic review becoming the center of controversy, so much to the point where people didn't understand how release dates work.
Jeez, can nothing please y'all? This guy might as well watch Morbius if he thinks it's that bad of a movie. Christ, man, be more fucking positive for once in your life. Have you seen Sonic movie 2? No, I haven't, but stop.
Or when people pointed to his analysis of media reviewers and accused him of sexism due to the lack of any female media reviewer in his video. Only to be proven objectively wrong on that matter. LSMark has shown himself to defend himself on both of these instances and made videos devoted to some of these cases. So what in particular about this Twitter drama makes me want to cover it now? Well, the fact of the matter is that it's very short and abrupt, and I doubt that he's going to make an entire video addressing this drama. Since he's probably got other things on his plate, and since he's one of the biggest cartoon reviewer channels on the platform, there's a higher likelihood that he'll be accused of harassment as a pure byproduct of his channel size. Leaving this to me, it's perfect since I've wanted to discuss LSMark on the channel for quite some time. What exactly was the cause of this recent discourse? The OB Twitter starts out with the sequence that leads us to Mark. What exactly caused this recent discourse? The OP started this sequence leading to LSMark was asking why did Spider-Verse discourse die down? There's a myriad of reasons as to why. For example, it makes sense that Spider-Verse wouldn't be the all-encompassing discourse when it initially came out. More importantly, typically fan bases are normally within their own spaces. The response we're going to be focusing on is Comrade Luigi, who started it off by saying public schools are back in session, with Ali replying, attempting to point out the contradiction of desiring media to be treated seriously, but also being unwilling to watch shows from people with dubious morality. Okay. Comrade quote tweeted his response by saying, animation is cinema. Types are pretty obviously fans of characters and writing rather than the artistry that goes into the animation itself. Asked them to name a single person involved in the Spider-Verse production other than Lord or Miller and they'll freeze up. This response is puzzling to me. It's the equivalent of saying, oh, you're an anime fan? Well, name me 100 animes. You want a reboot then if you can't. Furthermore, they didn't know the exact name of the people who animated every aspect of this movie. That doesn't mean they didn't enjoy it or the medium in which it was expressed in, or someone couldn't appreciate the cartoon far more than IRL movies. This tweet was then quote tweeted by Harley Harry, finally getting us to the target of this video and what the center of this topic came about. Having Harry saying the following, look at how short the segment is where he actually talks about the animation and art and compare it to the rest of the video. I'm sorry, I couldn't help but ask, why exactly is that an issue? Not only did he in fact enjoy this series, but he regretted not having watched it sooner. LSMark, I think people would understand Mark better if they understood him as the following. Mark is a reviewer of TV shows first and foremost, and an appreciator of animation secondary. You'll probably be puzzled right now as to why I'm making that delineation, but keep it in mind for the rest of the video. LSMark quote tweeted this weird tweet by saying the following, I never understood bitching about this. If I'm making a video about an entire series, why wouldn't I split up the time talking about different aspects like the history, about the creator, the writing, the animation? Why is that a bad thing to care about other aspects? Like, I don't talk about animation or don't go into in-depth to it at all, the ins and outs of it, and that's fine. Watch someone else who does. I don't think I've ever claimed to care a lot about animation. If anything, I've always said the opposite. I've never advertised that as being the main focus of my videos. Like, what did you expect when you clicked on my video when my attitude has never changed the past 5 years on the matter? The time I decided to talk about animation, it's more often than not the results in people complaining that I can't speak on the matter because I haven't studied thousands of classic cartoons and animators, and my videos are always been just my opinion, not fact. Mark just talks about the writing, but the visuals should be able to tell the story. They say while bitching about the video where I say just that, in which he links a video clip.
There's so much variety in these shots. It makes his long-winded rants so much more entertaining when paired with the animation. Like if he's talking about the pressures of what he should say to the girl he likes, we see him walking on a tightrope. And then it zooms out and shows that it's actually just a little bar that comes up when you're texting someone. It's simple and may not sound like a lot, but when you're watching it does so much in keeping you engaged.
The majority of people seem to hyper-focus on the second tweet, resulting in these apparently charitable interpretations of what Mark said. Evan, the dead meme, would say the following. Animation YouTuber clarifies that he doesn't care about animation. Not surprising considering most of his experience with animation consists of Family Guy and Very Odd Parents. I suppose if we're talking about video essays, sure, but that wouldn't speak to his large librarian level of knowledge about the medium in general. Like, he's made videos about series external of that, considering he's made an entire review of South Park, the series up to its current iteration. Or what about all of the movies he reviewed about the Smurfs or Alvin and the Chipmunks? This just comes across as someone who's never actually watched the channel, because simply even perusing the channel, this is just not the case. Does he have a particular fascination or interest with Family Guy and Very Odd Parents? Yeah, you can have a particular favorites, but that doesn't mean that his knowledge is often exclusively the byproduct of watching these two shows. Old Man Yells at Cloud says the following. Objectively, why review animation then? This would be like if I opened up a YouTube channel to talk about basketball and then talked about something else for 80% of all of my videos, then said I don't even like basketball if I get called out on it. Objectively, why review animation then? What are you, Mauler? Alright, all jokes aside, I'm going to just say the following. That's just simply not what he said. He said it's not the main focus of his channel. He doesn't do in-depth analysis about animation, but he can still enjoy the show because that is simply the medium in which the art of the show is expressed through. The show is more than just simply the medium it's expressed within, and if that was the case, then sure, your argument would make sense. But taking the most charitable interpretation as to what he's saying, rather than attempting to figure out as to whether or not that is the center focus of his channel, would result in quote tweets such as this one. So we're gonna move on to the next tweet. Cartoon YouTuber clarifies he never claimed to care about animation. Would that the rest of them could be so honest? I'm pretty sure they meant to say wish that the rest of them could be so honest, but yeah, I think if you want to understand what I mean, probably refer to the previous other interjections I've made so far. The tweet that got the most amount of engagement is the one we're going to be focusing on, where it says the following. Opens animation Twitter's YouTuber's video. Does not care about animation. Weird white guy look. LS Mark isn't an animation review channel. He's a channel that reviews animated TV shows. I could understand this criticism taking precedence if LS Mark's channel revolved around evaluating how animation functions and conveys ideas. Then sure, you might have an argument if that was simply the case. Supersonic Gamer posts an iconic Twitter meme discussing how people twist other people's words, with Abba replying by mentioning something that's far more accurate to what Mark actually said. He was pretty clear. He said he didn't care about animation as much. A black guy from the 70s responds with, he literally didn't. Abba replies with a quote from what Mark said verbatim. But if you notice the slight change of word, you'll notice how dishonest this is to what Mark actually said. The exaggeration in the quote tweet itself versus the more accurate depiction of what Mark actually said. Mark said he doesn't make that the main focus of his channel, where the quote tweet satirizes that to such a degree that it's no longer what Mark even said, not even remotely close. A black black guy from the 70s then responds with, "My bad. I just noticed you changed your stance from he doesn't care about animation to he doesn't care about it as much. That said, what are weird thing to give a shit about?" Resulting in Abba responding with the following: "If you, as an animation YouTuber, does not give the art form of animation the lion's share of attention, what is there to talk about other than over-analyzing ancillary components? The most important part of animation is the animated component. This is non-negotiable." And then we have me replying with the following: "If we're purely talking about an animation, sure, but we're talking about a show, which animation is the primary medium in which it is conveyed. Therefore, the ancillary are providing necessary support for the discussion." Sounds familiar, like that's what the word ancillary means. Weird. I know, a bit snarky, but it is Twitter. Abba responds with the following: "He talks about everything else more than animation. If you look at the time codes in the video from the quote tweet thread, it's interspliced throughout his review. I don't know why you're hyper-focusing on this segment's shortness rather than the substance of what's being said there. It's basically what I'm trying to get across with my reply, but I think that's enough reading for now. All this understood, Ella's Mark is in fact a YouTuber who enjoys animation and the medium in which these stories are translated into. As a media reviewer, there are certainly people who dedicated the entire share of their content, and the IP discussions revolve around just doing that, discussing the fascination with particular aspects of an IP. For example, we have Sucker Punch, who doesn't talk about the competitive elements of video games, rather he spends the majority of his videos giving discussions and in-depth talks about design philosophy, where he goes into discussions about color palettes, his interest on how they display the colors, and pinpoints how stories can be conveyed through design choices they make about certain characters. Or we have channels like Shady Durags, who's also a media reviewer, but his primary wheelhouse, he spends the majority of the time not discussing the animation in any capacity really, but majority of the time period he discusses the stories and how they're conveyed, because more often than not he's discussing King of the Hill, which is basically the staple of his channel. It's also an insanely down-to-earth, grounded show where it's not exactly all that exaggeratory or doing things outlandish. In fact, for the majority of the time, a lot of things that are done within the King of the Hill can be replicated in IRL. But does that mean that it shouldn't be animated? We'll return to this soon enough, but I think we can move on to our next example. Doodly is a prime example of what you're looking for if your interest happens to be animation. Not only is his avatar well animated, but this is done as in a way to convey some animation principles. He shows a vast and intricate knowledge of animation, and his ability to replicate whatever he's conveying to the audience shows that he knows the ins and outs of animation. With all these channels I talked about up to this point, speaking about the medium in IPs in different ways, especially ones that pertain to animation, there is one question that is coming up to the forefront when we discuss these channels, and that is, does any of these styles outside of Doodly's way of making content mean that they no longer care about animation and if it's an art form? I would say no. Every one of these content creators made their videos with an intricate elaboration. This could only come from an immense passion attached to the medium in question. All these people I'm referring to have made some observations that couldn't be made by anyone unless you had hours and hours of observations devoted to whatever particular medium you happen to be fascinated by. If we discuss mediums and animation in the way you described it, every conversation about King of the Hill would be about whether or not it should be an animated series. And we turn to Toon Tariq for why that is an embarrassingly narrow-minded view of animation.
Instead of questioning why is something like Undone animated if all they're gonna do is rotoscope, I think we should just accept that this is the medium that they wanted to go with. Nothing ever needs a reason to be animated. It can have one, but it doesn't need one. I personally think it's great that we live in a world where we can have Lloyd in Space, Gumball, some anime that I don't watch or whatever, and King of the Hill, and they can all be different and they can all be animated. It only shows growth and variety. It shows that the medium can handle any story. Because despite what it looks like they trying to tell y'all, this shit ain't going nowhere. So we might as well use it to stand out. I'll tell you what.
LS Mark's channel might not be for you if you only want to see people speak about animation endlessly. But that doesn't mean animation isn't considered an art form, even by the lens in which Mark views it through. Mark has made a considerable effort to highlight a show that isn't talked about as much as a Family Guy or Very Odd Parents. He's harsh on cartoons because he believes they can be more. I don't think people would review hours upon hours of a particular show if they did not believe it was an art form. More importantly, in these long form videos, he speaks tirelessly about the animation and how certain series animation has evolved throughout the years, how it creates or breaks immersion, everything else that is expected when talking about the medium, and everything else that is expected. Now, knowing this, what does Mark say about the show at the end of the day we're talking about as an example that shows that he hasn't spent the bulk of his video discussing whether or not the animation is good? Well,
Sappy, some might call it pretentious, but you know what? I don't really care. Because no matter what you think of this series, you can't deny that it was someone's complete unfiltered vision. It's a piece of art, which is more than I could say about, I don't know, Big Mouth or Paradise PD or whatever else shit Netflix pumps out for quick revenue. To me, it stands as an excellent miniseries, and something that truly highlights the advantages of streaming over television, because something like this would not have been possible then. Makes me wish companies were more willing to take chances with these similar, shorter, more earnest personal stories. But even if Netflix makes nothing else like this, I'm glad something like Terra Across the Dotted Line was able to be made, because it's without a doubt one of my favorite miniseries ever.
he spent a large amount of time to bring attention to an animation that wasn't well known by the public at large, to ensure that people knew it was an art. And if your concern begins and ends at whether or not he spent an arbitrary amount of time talking about animation, then I believe you lost the scope on the bigger picture. You aren't concerned about pushing art. You are into it for the sake of posturing about being able to name a plethora of animators. You're concerning yourself with pseudo-intellectualism by pretending that there is an inconsistency about wanting the art form to be taken seriously without wanting every creator to be John Caversi. You know, the guy who created Ren and Snippy? And yeah, that guy. At the end of the day, he should be encouraged, and other people should be encouraged to explore the medium as much as possible. And the way we do so is by bringing hidden gems to the public attention, one show at a time. Anyway, that's everything for me. I'm Android Axel. Until next time, peace.